Hi, I'm Brian Goulet of GouletPens.com, and this is episode number 68 of Goulet Q&A. And we had some requests a couple weeks back to do different locations and having special guests. And I can't think of any more special guests to have today than my two kids, Joseph, age 5, and Ellie, age 3. It's been a while since we had them in any videos. And the reason that we are here today is because we are having a snow day here in Central Virginia, and we had to shut our office down. So I had the foresight to bring the camera home and shoot Q&A from home today, because otherwise I would have had to cancel for the week. So here we are, shooting in our dining room, and just wanted to say hello with the kids again, because it's kind of been a while. So let me take the mic off and kind of get in front of them and let them have the limelight a little bit. So let's see. Here you go. You want to say hi?
Hi, it's me. And I had this motorcycle.
Ooh, what is that?
It is Wild Style's motorcycle. Do you know why I call it her motorcycle?
Why?
Because she built it.
Oh, yeah. What is that from?
It's from the Lego movie.
Oh, yeah. Do you like Legos?
Yes. And this is from the Lego movie, too.
Oh, yeah.
And so is... There's actually a lot of these in the Lego movie.
Mm-hmm. What is that?
It's a Lego Beetle. It's a Lego Beetle.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Ellie?
It's a construction truck.
Ellie, what do you have in your hand?
Hey, a magic wand. I have a lot and I'm in spaceship.
Okay, can you let Ellie have a turn?
Okay.
Okay, Ellie, what are you dressed up like today?
A princess.
A princess, yeah. What did we just finish doing? What did we just watch on TV?
Frozen.
Frozen. Yeah, you like Frozen?
Yeah. Uh-huh, and Dumbo.
And Dumbo, too. Yeah, we watched Dumbo as well. Yeah. Are you having fun today being at home with Mommy and Daddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. You looking at the microphone?
Yeah. So, what do you do now?
What's your favorite song from Frozen, Ellie?
Let it go.
Let It Go?
Uh-huh.
You want to sing it?
Let go, be back anymore. Let go, it was there, Let go, go on me anyway.
That was lovely, Ellie. Yay, Ellie. Wasn't that wonderful, Joseph?
Yeah.
Yeah. Joseph, now, there's another movie that you have a favorite song. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Mine is Everything is Awesome.
How do you sing that?
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool and you're part of the team. Everything is awesome. You're living a dream.
Yeah. That's a cool song. You two are both such good singers. Thank you very much.
And I got more to tell you.
Okay, what else did you want to say?
I said that this is also from the Lego movie.
Uh-huh.
There's actually a bunch of these in the Lego movie.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
It's
Is it a helicopter?
No, it's a robo-car.
Oh.
Find them.
What are you looking for?
There's some rockets
Oh, I
inside.
know where the duckies
There's
are.
some rockets. The rockets are right here. Here are the rockets.
The rockets.
And they can shoot too.
Really? Yep.
No, I have more Legos.
Oh, I know you have more Legos. That's okay. We need to go get ready for our nap, okay?
I know.
All right, can you say bye, Ellie?
I only have 2 more things.
Can you look up there and say bye-bye?
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And I have this thing.
You have another sandwich?
No. I have
That's
this
okay. We'll get one later, okay?
And backups come from the Lego movie too. That's it.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, bye.
I showed everything.
Yeah. All right. Got my kids in bed. And yeah, how adorable are they, right? Like, I know every parent thinks that they have the cutest kids in the world, but I'm pretty sure mine actually are. Somebody out there has to have the cutest kids. I'm pretty sure it's mine. So anyway, proud papa here. So anyway, Q&A. Here we go. I gotta get in the zone here. I'm just like really thrown off my element here. And And I've got like the bay window behind me with all the snow and everything, so I'm like being blinded right now, but pretty good lighting and everything. So anyway, the kids are napping now, so I'm gonna try and shoot this Q&A while it's reasonably quiet in the house. I've got a bunch of good questions for this week. Before I get to them, I'll just got a couple of quick updates on stuff that's been going on. Got some new colors of some Leuchtturm notebooks. This is not one of them. I don't have like any of the normal stuff that I would try to show because I'm at home. So Leuchtturm, this is a Leuchtturm, but we got some new colors in, so that's pretty cool, kind of exciting. And then let's see, I just shot a Conklin Duragraph video, a nice long one, very detailed, very thorough. So that's kind of cool. Been meaning to do that for a while. Finally got that one out, so that was good. And I actually just shot a video on the new Filofax notebook, which is going to be coming out here really, really soon. Did we launch that, Rachel?
Next week.
Next week, okay, yes. We didn't actually launch it. We've been prepping for it for a while. Yeah, I got to take some measurements and stuff, but we got the video shot. We didn't want to start selling that notebook before really having all the details kind of buttoned up. And now we got a snow day, and so it's kind of thrown everything off. But anyway, so that'll be coming out next week. It's pretty exciting though. It's a very, very cool notebook. I talked about it in last week's Q&A if you want to see some of those details. But we're going to be coming out with a full, like kind of crazy in-depth video on it very soon. So that's kind of neat. And then we got another surprise, a couple of them actually, a couple of tricks up our sleeve for upcoming products. And I'm not ready to talk about yet, but we still got some things going on. So there's plenty going on. The Copper Orange All-Star is going to be coming out any day now. It should arrive, so that's pretty exciting. Just really lots of cool stuff. Okay, so for this week, first grouping I have is question on pens and writing. The first question I have is for Glenn L on Facebook. And Glenn asks, what are your recommended fountain pens for lazy people like myself? I like pens that are easy to use, easy to fill, and most important, super easy to clean. Effort schmeffort, your top picks for lazy pens, please. This is a really funny question. I've never actually been asked it quite this way, so, props to you, Glenn. You went through a little bit of effort to ask that question, so, I'm sure it was tough to lift your hands onto the keyboard, instead of just whatever. So, yeah, when it comes to pen cleaning, there's one trick that just completely changed my world, and that was using a bulb syringe. And I show how to do that in the Fountain Pen 101 video, fast pen flushing. Got a link to it on the blog, and you can just search it, whatever. Look in the playlist on YouTube and you'll find it. But that bulb syringe trick just changes everything. So, you can have your piston filling pens and all this other stuff, but just going with a straight up cartridge converter pen, because you can take the pen apart and just use that bulb syringe, it just makes an easy cleaning job out of just about anything. And if you're especially lazy, you want to use cartridges. Don't even bother with a converter, because then you don't even have to clean out the converter. It's really not that hard to clean out a converter, but if you're going for maximum laziness, okay, use cartridges and then just flush out the body with a bulb syringe. And that's literally all you have to do. And if you use the same color of ink cartridge, you only have to flush that thing out maybe once a month, if that. If you're using a pen with any kind of regularity, you want to change it, you want to clean it every time you change colors, but if you want true maximum laziness, use cartridges, flush it maybe once a month. It should take you a minute, maybe, and you can keep on going, just plug in the next cartridge and you're all set. So as far as like which specific pen, I don't know, they're all kind of similar in terms of like cleaning and stuff like that. There's, other than the filling mechanism that the pen is used, I can't really think of like reasons, unless you're going with like a clear demonstrator and you want to be really particular about how clean it is. But if you're going with a cartridge converter, the demonstrator aspect doesn't really matter as much. Just don't go with something with like a clear grip on it, and you should be okay. So going with something like a Lamy Safari, Lamy All-Star, they're workhorse pens. You can just kind of use them, as much as you want, and you should be pretty good. So you'll be all set with that. I think that will set you up well, Glenn.
Hey Brian, what's even lazier?
What's that? Oh, that's true. Yeah. I don't know if anybody can actually hear you on the mic, so I'll just repeat what you said. Rachel's shouting, just like old days, Rachel. You're shouting to me from the other room. Rachel says, if you're even lazier, you can go with the Pilot Varsity, which is a disposable, preloaded pen. You don't even have to do anything. You literally just open up right with it and then throw it away when you're done. I guess that would be maximum laziness right there. So, yeah. So they're like, what, $3 a piece? Not a big deal, but there's definitely cheaper ways to go than that, but hey, there's your option. Next question is from Lori Arrowood. Lori put a little more effort into her pen cleaning. I'm just kidding. I'm not picking on you, Glenn. Lori asked on YouTube, says, "Hey Brian, I was browsing the web the other day for fountain pen stuff and came across a link for a Pilot Cocoon fountain pen. Maybe I'm crazy, but it looks to me to be the exact same thing as a Pilot Metropolitan. Yet it lists on JetPens for $45. The site also says the nib is metal, assuming that means non-gold. Am I missing something? What is the difference?" Well, you are correct. That pen, the nib is metal, stainless steel, just like the Pilot Metropolitan. It's the exact same pen as the Metropolitan. Okay, so the Pilot Metropolitan is what it's called in the US. It's called the Cocoon in Japan, and it's called the MR in Europe, but it's the same pen. With the exception of in Europe, they use a standard international cartridge converter, which is interesting. So I don't know, I would actually almost kind of prefer to have that in the US. That would be kind of handy, but I don't know, the Pilot ones are okay. But for whatever reason, they did it differently in Europe, but it's the same pen. They name it differently for different reasons. Probably has to do with copyright, trademark kind of things, depending on, maybe the word cocoon in the US was used with some other kind of thing and they couldn't get the rights for it. I don't know. So they named it the Metropolitan. So basically, yeah, it's a $45 pen, and that's what it actually costs. So like in the US, for whatever reason, this pen is $15. I still don't really understand why. It's got to be some kind of loss leader or something. I really don't know. But I'm not joking when I say the Metropolitan at $15 is a phenomenal pen for the money. It really is. So that's pretty much the explanation I have. The Metropolitan really just is that cool of a pen. I could talk about the Metro all day long. What? Volume? Yeah, maybe, but they have to sell a bunch in Japan too. I don't know. Anyway, so paper questions. That's the next category here. I got a question from Ty W on Facebook and says, "I love my Rodeo webbook. However, for daily note jotter, it seems overkill. What's a better replacement, preferably with dots and/or ivory paper? I loathe bleed through and shadowing. Hence, ending my decade-long love with Moleskine thanks to the elegance that is a fountain pen." Totally feel you, Ty. I mean, definitely a Rodeo Web notebook is going to be leaps and bounds, paper quality-wise, over Moleskine. The thing for you, it's almost like you set up this question perfectly for the Leuchtturm 1917, because you pretty much answer your own question with the way you ask it. The Leuchtturm 1917 is very similar to a Moleskine, but with better paper. That's pretty much what it is. The paper is not going to be quite what you have in a web notebook. These, I just happen to have both of these that I personally use, so I have them at home. But they're both great paper. Leuchtturm is not quite as ink resistant as the Rodeo, so it's not going to resist everything. But for most of your normal stuff, it's going to be great, especially if you like to use extra fine, even medium nibs, which if you're using the dot one like you're asking me about here, it's a 5mm ruling. You're really not practically going to be able to use a broad or stub or anything like that on that tight 5mm ruling. So what I end up doing for my personal one is I use, this is the one that I use. Many of you know I'm reading the Bible all the way through right now. I'm towards the end of Ezekiel right now, if that matters to you, 53 days in. Yeah, do the math on that one. I'm reading it a lot, very fast. So I do, man, 100%. So I've taken a bunch of notes, and I'm using, an extra fine Faber-Castell nib. And I haven't taken super consistent notes, but when I do take them, I'm actually using a pretty saturated, pretty dark ink as well. I don't have my remote here, so I can't really show you all that well. But basically, very, very little show through. I mean, this ink, it's Private Reserve Electric DC Blue. And if you are using a really dark blue ink like that, that's pretty saturated, pretty wet, and you have a paper that's going to have any kind of show through, you would see it with that combination. So the fact that you aren't really seeing it, I've got another brown ink there, that's Faber-Castell's brown. You would be seeing a lot of competing writing on the way through, and you don't. So that's definitely the right combination for you. It's got more pages than the Rodeo as well. So Leuchtturm's really stepped up their game. They're actually been improving their paper quality. They've got some new colors that they just came out with too. So pretty cool notebook. That's I think right up your alley. Travis W on Facebook asked, if you could only use one brand or type of paper for the rest of your life, what would it be? Wow, that's quite a commitment. Okay, so I know I just like praised the Leuchtturm up and down, and for this particular notebook, I am definitely a big fan. But if you're talking like just one brand for the rest of my life, you're gonna limit me to that, then I would say Rhodia would probably have to be my paper of choice. And here's the reason. I mean, I love Clairefontaine, don't get me wrong. Absolutely love it. Just the paper options are not as diverse, at least of what they offer in the US. Clairefontaine has all kinds of different formats and stuff like that that are in Europe and other places, but in the US, well, I guess, I mean, Rhodia is not like super expansive, but they do have some options. So they've got white paper in the regular, you know, top staple bounds and stuff like that. They've got the meeting notebooks in a wire bound. They've got the off-white tablets in the Rhodia Premium. They've got web notebooks, so you got a bound journal. You know, just lots of options. You know, even the premium notebooks or the tablets, you can use that as correspondence paper. It's really nice. So you got a bunch of options. They got a lot of dot paper. I'm a huge fan of Rhodia dot pads. And so it's just kind of got everything. And it's a nice kind of all-around paper. You know, the premium is going to be a little bit slicker. All the other Rhodia paper is going to be that 80 gram, just kind of a little bit of tooth to it, but still really smooth. Works great with pencils, roller balls, fountain pens. You know, it's pretty well versatile. So that would have to be my choice, would be the Rhodia as a brand. Chad C. Asks the next question on Facebook, says, Dear Brian, I'm a lover of Rhodia paper for writing, but not in love with the 8mm wide ruling found on most of Rhodia's large writing pads. I tend to write small with short quick strokes, and a smaller ruling would be great. Do you know if a smaller ruled lined large Rhodia pad exists or is perhaps in development? Thanks, P.S. The Friday Q&A has become date night for my wife and I. That's very endearing. Thank you very much. Hi, Chad and Chad's wife. I'm honored to be here at your third wheel. Anyway, so yeah, so kind of piggybacking, it's a good flow in the paper questions this week, right? There needs to be a little bit of clarification on this one, because you talk about the 8mm as if that's the standard, but that's actually not the standard for the Rhodia pads. So there are some Rhodia 8mm pads, not many of them though. It's really just the wire bound ones that have an 8mm ruling. Clairefontaine in their notebooks standardizes on the 8mm on the larger notebooks. Rhodia, for all of their top staple bounds, for premium and regular line, it's all 7mm ruler that they standardize on. And 7mm ruling is pretty close, almost exact. It's like very close to the like American college ruled. American college ruled is like 7.1mm or 7.13 or something like that, but it's close enough where it's basically college ruling. So if the college ruling, the 7mm is too wide for you and you're looking for something a little smaller, you're going to be kind of limited in that respect, and I seriously doubt Rhodia is going to deviate too much away from that, especially on their larger pads. The only thing that they have that's a smaller ruling than a 7mm is their small web notebooks, which this is the A5 web notebook. The A6 one, the smaller one, is literally half the size. So the way that it works is you have A5, if you cut it in half, that becomes A6. So it's about that size, like 3.5 by 5.5-ish. That is a 6mm ruling in their lined web notebook, but that's your only option. It's not a large pad by any means. The option you might want to consider though, if you wanted to go, it's quite a bit of a jump, but if you go with the Rhodia dot pad, it's a 5mm dot ruling on there. I don't have an example to show you here. If I was at work, man, I would have a dot. Actually, I think I do have a dot pad, but it's out of my reach and I'm tethered to the camera with my mic and everything, so I'm not going to go grab it, but you know what a dot pad looks like. I've used it in like every video I've ever done. But it's 5mm ruling, so that I think might be your ticket. You can get that in that large 18, number 18 format, which is an A4 size. It's got the Rhodia white paper and it's phenomenal stuff. I like the dots as well because the ruling is not as prominent as the lines. It doesn't compete quite as much. So it's definitely something that I think might kind of get you where you need to go. All right, LiAnn7396 on YouTube asked the next paper question, wrapping up the paper category here. What is your favorite diary and paper? And please leave out the Rhodia dotted one, the one you use for pen testing. See, it's like you guys all got together and like created a story for this paper section. You're all like tying together and everything. Okay, so this one's kind of easy because I basically showed you the two that I am using. I was let me make a disclaimer that my all-time favorite diary or journal, if you want to, I like to call it a journal. You know, maybe it's just a guy thing, but I think of diary, I think of like the Anne Frank stuff that my sister had when I was a kid, you know what I mean? Or not the Anne Frank, Freudian slip there. Lisa Frank is what I was thinking of. I guess Anne Frank did have a diary, huh? No, the one, my sister did not have the diary of Anne Frank. Lisa Frank is what I'm talking about. You know, the one with like the unicorns and rainbow horses and things like that. No, that's what I think of when I think of diary, the kind that you have to lock them and stuff like that. No, I consider more of a journal just because like that's how I use it, okay? But anyway, it's really neither here nor there. Is there an actual literal distinction between a diary and a journal? I should probably know that, but maybe a good little side question of the week there for you. What is the difference between a diary and a journal? Tell me what you think. But anyway, so the two that I end up using the most is a Rodeo Web Notebook and the Leuchtturm 1917, and both in the A5 size. I just like that as a size. You can go smaller and it's more portable, but then it's harder for me to write in. I don't like it as much. I would rather adapt my writing environment to make myself more comfortable than have something a little smaller and more portable. And if you looked at the What's in My Bag that we put up on Instagram a few weeks ago, and you see how much stuff I carry around, I'm not afraid to carry around another A5 size notebook. You know, my backpack weighs like 20 pounds, and I am not joking that much. Maybe it's not 20 pounds, but it's pretty heavy. But anyway, so yeah, that would probably be it. So now we're talking about comparing my two favorite ones, and you know, I'm gonna go ahead and just commit and say I'm gonna pick a favorite. So basically between the Rodeo and the Leuchtturm, I don't know. I enjoy them both for different reasons. The Rodeo has got 7mm ruling, which I really like. This one's got the dots, which I like too. I end up using the Rodeo more as an actual journal for hey, this is what I got going on right now. Or if I'm going to a conference or something like that, I'm taking notes in this because the 7mm ruling is much more to my size, to where I can write with a little more of a stream of consciousness. The dot ruling in this I end up using for more note taking and a little bit more concise, detailed type stuff. You know, so more. Not quite as much stream of consciousness because it's smaller and I have to be a little more intentional about how I write. So I guess if I was going with a more natural kind of diary-like thing, I would go with the Rodeo. Okay, business. I only have one business question this week. I had another good business one, but it involves showing some stuff that I have in my office, and so I kind of bailed on that question. But good business question I had this week is from Chuck B on Facebook. Asked, have you thought of offering nib tuning on purchases? I get asked this a lot, you know, hey, I'd love to have my nib tuned by you guys, or ground, or added flex, or whatever it might be. It seems to make sense. You know, there are some nibmeisters out there. Richard Binder's done it for a while. He's kind of sunsetting on that side of his business. John Modishaw does it. Not too many others do it actually, but I guess there are some, but there's not a lot of retailers that offer in-house nib services. I think nib grinders and nibmeisters and stuff like that in general are really rare, and it takes years to really get good at it, let alone good enough to say every pen I'll sell I'll do something to, or whatever it might be, or I'll stake my whole company's reputation on this one person that may or may not get you what you want. So most of the nibmeisters out there are just individuals that do things on kind of an individual basis. And I imagine a lot of them get into the business through the restoration route, they get into pen repair and nib tuning and stuff like that. So to have somebody purely focused on nib grinding services, that's really pretty rare and hard to come by. I don't have anybody at Goulet Pens now really that has that kind of experience. I've done some nib stuff myself, really not enough to even be able to charge anyone for it. I do a lot, I've shot videos on doing the nib smoothing and that kind of stuff, using the micro mesh and all that, and that's stuff that anybody can do, which with some practice and stuff. But getting into the grinding and flow adjustment and all this kind of stuff, it takes a lot of practice, takes training under somebody for a long time. And I don't have anybody that has those skills. I don't know anybody around here, around where we are in Richmond, Virginia, that has that kind of experience. And other nibmeisters that do have that kind of experience, they don't need my business. They're self-sustained on their own and they're doing their own thing. They don't really want to be tied to to anybody else. So it's you know, it's not like I can just affiliate myself immediately with somebody and give them all my work, you know. And so it's a challenge. You know, it seems like there's a big opportunity there. The logistics behind it are really, really, really tough. It's something that I still haven't been able to work through yet. And, you know, pretty much my only option, it would seem, is to train somebody in-house to do that. You know, like hire somebody and then train them up to do those kind of services. But then I would basically be like subsidizing their learning curve on customers' pens, you know, and it's like, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to be like the first one that my first nib tuner person ends up doing nib work on. So it's like I need to really kind of get them trained up, and it's just I don't know how I would do that. So it's been a real challenge to even think through that process. So I would say, to kind of summarize everything, that you know, if you consider it like that option is like a door, I would say pretty much that door is closed right now, but it's not locked. You know, I guess it's possible, but it's going to take some work to actually get it open and be able to walk through it. But it's not like deadbolted. There's a little bit of light shining through the keyhole, I guess. But that's kind of where I'll leave the metaphor there. Got a couple of personal questions here, personal category for this week. Jackie M on Facebook says that inquiring minds want to know, if someone were to grab Brian's hands while he's talking, does he become functionally mute? Just kidding. Q&A is one of the high points of my week. All right, Jackie, you actually had this question last week. This is one of the ones that got cut off because I rambled on so long about Noodler's Black and all that. But, you know, I do tend to gesticulate, which is to talk with your hands. It's not a dirty word, but that's the actual term for that. I always talk with my hands, and I have kind of a funny story about that. So when I was a kid and my dad would bring me to preschool or whatever, you know, my parents ran a business out of their house. Things were crazy, and it's kind of like us. Like, we put our kids in preschool kind of reluctantly. My parents did the same thing with their business because it was just, you know, too much to have, you know, 2 kids at home while you're trying to run a business. Imagine that. But anyway, so I did like a half day at preschool kind of thing when I was about 4 and a half. And my dad would always, it was like bonding time for me and my dad. I think it was a point, I have an older sister, so it was the point when my sister had gone off to school already. So I would have been like 4 and a half. It would have been the year before I went to kindergarten or something. And so my dad would, I guess this was the 80s, right? So he would wear white pants a lot, and he would always drink his coffee in an open coffee mug. And you can see where the story is going, right? So I would always sit in the passenger seat. My dad would be in the driver's seat. We'd be driving together. It was a pretty short drive. It was 5 to 10 minutes, you know, so we'd have our little dad-son bonding time in the car together, and I was all proud to be driving with my papa. And I would be talking, and I would talk so much. I would also push all the radio buttons. I've always been very tactile. I love to push buttons and mess with stuff. That's how I got into, that's part of why I got into pens. I love working with my hands. But I would wave my hands so much, and he says that like at least once a week, I would knock his coffee mug and spill his coffee all over his white pants. And so he still kind of like rags on me a little bit for it to this day. But now that I'm a father, I'm thinking to myself, like, Dad, why did you keep using an open coffee mug? Or like, why didn't you switch hands? Or why did you wear white pants? Like, you know, so it's like, okay, some of it was me, but you know, some of it was totally him too. So it's ragging on my dad a little bit. It's totally out of love. You know, I appreciate the joke, appreciate the gesture there. But yeah, it's very true. I do talk with my hands a lot, especially in this kind of setting. I feel like you're literally just sitting here watching me. I feel like I need to be a little more dramatic, a little more like hand motion, breaking the monotony of just looking at my face with my hand gestures. So I don't know. It's part of how it is. I also did show choir in high school, so maybe part of that is like some of the just, you know, training I had. I don't know. It's a stupid statement, but anyway. Next question I had was for GimmeeCookiee on my blog. Love that screen name. Congratulations on almost reaching 20,000 subscribers. And at the time you asked that question, we were just under 20,000. We're now like 20,400 something, which is just 500 something maybe. It's blowing my mind. So anyway, GimmeeCookiee asked, which YouTube channels do you personally enjoy watching, pen-related or otherwise? And to be fair, the original question you did open up and ask to my whole team, but given that I'm not around any of them today, I'm not going to be able to include that, but I can talk for myself anyway. So I don't watch a whole lot of stuff other than like the random, you know, cat falling in the toilet video that gets forwarded my way. I do get sucked into those every now and then. You know, I don't watch a whole lot with regularity. You know, I have a relatively young team at Goulet, and there's definitely some of the classic YouTube videos like Double Rainbow and, you know, Charlie Bit Me and like that type of stuff, you know, Rebecca Black Friday and all that, like a lot of inside jokes that we get tossed around, you know, Boys Will Be Girls and stuff like that, I'm trying to remember the name of that group that did that. Shoot, I can't remember. Harvard sailing team, I think is who it is. But anyway, so, but that was like, you know, years ago, and it's still kind of just like an inside joke. We'll pull it up every now and then at work and have Rebecca Black blasting on a Friday, you know, because that's what we used to do like back in the garage days when that song was kind of a thing. But other than that, for me personally, I do watch a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk stuff. I'm a big fan of his. You know, he has a Q&A just like this now, which, you know, I started mine first, so I'd like to think that, you know, he was inspired by me, even though he's obviously never seen it. But anyway, so I like his Q&A. His are a little bit shorter than mine, so it's not quite as much of a commitment. And he doesn't do his weekly. He does them like kind of randomly a little bit, but he does them a little more regularly. So he's on like 77 or something like that after doing it for like 5 months. So he's definitely, you know, but his work ethic's crazy, but he's got a lot of cool stuff. He's got a lot of business stuff in there. So there's a lot of things I can kind of pull out of that. And I've been following him for, gosh, 5.5 years now. So I've read his book, Crush It, back in 2009. That really influenced me. You can credit a lot of the reason I do videos today to Gary Vaynerchuk. Absolutely. So, you know, I still keep up with his stuff, like a lot of what he does. Every now and then I'll kind of keep up with Stephen Brown's stuff. You know, shout out to SBRE Brown on YouTube. He's my boy a little bit. We don't, you know, we're not like super tight. We don't talk all the time, but we definitely have like a mutual respect for each other. Certainly fountain pen respect. You know, I was there. He literally sent me his very first video. I remember because I've been doing videos for at least a year or so, maybe even longer. And he had sent me a video that he had shot about the Visconti traveling ink pot, and it was just like, hey, I think you should consider carrying this product. It's pretty cool. And he sent me that video, and I was like, hey, that video is kind of cool. I was like, you did that pretty well, man. You should keep up some more videos. And lo and behold, he's got more videos out there than I do, I think. So, you know, you never know. You never know. Anybody can do it. It's YouTube. So it's really cool. So definitely shout out to him. He's got a lot of cool stuff, got a really good sense of humor. Now him and Aziz are paired up together. So it's really cool. They got a good thing going on. So shout out to Steven there. And then whenever Nathan Tardif puts a video out, his channel is Ink Need Last Forever on YouTube. He doesn't put out a lot of videos, but when he does, they're always just entertaining and informative on like 1,000 different levels. The most recent one that I was aware of is the Park Red video that he put out there. That's literally how I found out about that ink, because I discovered that video on YouTube. Nathan's got a habit of doing that. He just kind of puts stuff out there, and then, you know, we just kind of have to like quickly like, what, Park Red? What is that? We need to, okay, let's order some. Let's talk to our distributor. Like, can we get this ink? Is it going to be available anytime soon? What is happening? You know, what is this ink? What are the properties? You know, so it's all kinds of craziness. But so I definitely keep a close eye on what Nathan has going on. And then there's no one else really that I do with regularity. I do like to watch the occasional kind of comedy thing. You know, Jimmy Fallon's got a lot of good little skits and stuff like that. I'm, you know, a big fan of like fake auto-tune types, like Auto-Tune the News. I've watched a few of those, and just, you know, kind of funny, like I guess modern, like you know, pop type, not pop, but like not music, but like, I don't know, whatever the kids watch these days. You know, I like to kind of keep up on certain things every now and then, but not with a whole lot of regularity. All right, I got a couple of troubleshooting questions to kind of bring it home on this video. First one I have is from Mayra R on Facebook. Asked, my Metropolitan used to write very well, but lately when I'm writing, no ink will come out. I've had to force ink into the nib, and sometimes not even that works. What can I do to solve this problem? Okay, so this isn't necessarily like a Pilot Metropolitan specific recommendation, because, you know, it could be any number of things. A Pilot Metropolitan is usually a pretty solid writer. So I don't think it's like necessarily a Metropolitan specific issue. That's part of why, is because there are so many of those pens out there. Gotten a lot of just really good feedback. I use them myself a lot. They can dry out though, just like most fountain pens can. It's not one of these pens that is like infallible from drying out. Is that the right word? I don't know, but you know what I mean. So first thing I would do is make sure that it's got ink in it. That's one of the things with the Metropolitan that some people make a mistake on, is because the converter that comes with the pen is not clear. It's you know, it's a rubber sack, and so you can fill it and not realize that the ink is out of there until you actually go to like squeeze it and you can see. So if you've got the ink handy that you use it and you can squeeze it back into the bottle, or just squeeze it onto a napkin or tissue or something like that. But if you unscrew the body and then you squeeze the body of the what's it called, converter, squeeze the bladder of the converter, is any ink starting to kind of drip out of that pen? If it's not, that means you're pretty much out of ink. If it is starting to come out of there, okay, that means your nib might have just dried up a little bit. If you actually do have ink in that converter, then your nib might have dried out, which can happen, especially it's wintertime. You know, it's super dry, at least around here right now. And so I know for a fact that my pens are drying out much faster now than they do in the summertime. The summertime is very humid in Virginia. My pens like never dry out because it's like 9,000% humidity where we are here. But if you're in a dry area, which most people in the wintertime, it's super dry, that could very well be your issue. It's not that the whole pen necessarily has to dry out. It could just be around the nib area, and it just needs to kind of be primed up a little bit. Another trick you can do to kind of get it started up is if you've got any little bit of water handy, you can just kind of dip the nib into your water. I mean, obviously you'd want to make sure that's a cup you're not like going to drink out of again, but you know, just turn the sink on a little bit and just kind of whoop, get a little bit of water on there, or just a wet napkin or something even. You could just kind of touch it to the nib just to get a little bit of water in there, get that dried up ink kind of flowing again, and then once it starts that flow, you should be okay. If that's not working, if it's not a super quick fix like that, then I would try cleaning the pen. Just do a full cleaning, you know, just get it all cleaned up. If it's ink that's dried up in there, you get all the dried ink out of there. If it's out of ink and you probably want to change color anyway, maybe. Or, you know, sometimes if you've been using it for a while and maybe it's not an ink issue, but it's just there's junk in there because you get paper fibers and dust and all kinds of stuff that collects as you're writing onto the nib and in the feed and stuff like that. So cleaning it out will help flush a lot of that stuff out of there, kind of rule that out. You could also, when you're cleaning it, the nib and the feed pull out of that pen. So you can actually just grab it and just, you know, pull it right out of there. And then you can separate the nib and the feed, clean it that way. That really helps to get that particular pen nice and clean. And then you just put it back in there every which way. I've got, you know, look in the Pilot Metropolitan video I'm pretty sure I show how to do it there. You could try a different ink, maybe just the ink. It's an ink compatibility issue with the pen. It's just the ink isn't wanting to flow as well in that pen as maybe it could. So you could try that, try a wetter ink maybe, like especially maybe a lubricated ink would be an option, Noodler's Eel or something like that. Pilot Shizuku tend to be pretty wet, Diatramentis, something like that. And the last thing you can do is just really try to what I call pound down the ink, which is a little trick that I learned in Richard Binder's nib tuning workshop when I took that last year at the DC Pen Show. If you're holding a pen in your hand, which I don't even have one right on me, but if you're holding a pen in your hand and you have the writing surface right here, I have a writing surface, but you won't be able to see it very well. I guess you can. You can see it okay at the bottom. If you're holding the pen in your hand, you want to hold it so that the pen is clearly not anywhere near the table, but it's still in a kind of writing angle that you would normally have. And you take and you just kind of like pound. Yeah, I'm moving the camera, that's right. You can kind of pound on like that. I just thought of like Nathan's video with was it the Bay State Blue that he did that, Rachel? I'm pretty sure that was. Maybe it was the Bernanke. I can't remember. One of the ones where he pounded his fist. I think it was Bay State Blue. Anyway, that's going back several years. But anyway, I think Rachel might be upstairs. She would have commented by now. I think she has a phone call or something. Anyway, so if you're pounding it down like that, you want to make sure you're not slamming your nib down into the table, right? That would be bad. But if your nib is like clearly off the table, when you're pounding it like that, what you're doing is you're kind of like forcing the ink down through the feed. That's a way to kind of prime your pen without having to like open it up and squeeze the stuff down or whatever, like squeeze the converter and all that stuff. So doing that little pounding trick is a nice little trick to kind of get the ink kind of moving along. Okay. Next question I have is from Chris W. on Facebook. I've recently considered converting my Edison Collier to an eyedropper pen. However, I'm concerned about the inside of the barrel getting stained and affecting the appearance of the pen. even though it is on the inside, there's a slight amount of transparency. Any thoughts? Okay, it's a very natural concern. I can totally understand how you feel that way. It's always something to take into consideration whenever you're converting something to an eyedropper, just that the ink might, kind of hang around a little longer than you want to. Some inks do it more than others. I don't have like any specific guidepost that I can point you to say, yeah, these inks will always do this and these inks will always not. That's one of those characteristics that, like, it depends on the pen, it depends on the type of material it's made out of, it depends on the ink and its various properties. So I can't really say like how clingy the ink will be on the inside of your pen with any type of like definition. What I can say is that, like, in general, the inks that tend to do it worse are reds and purples, and sometimes blues, mainly because blues a lot of times have a red component in them. So I think reds are pretty much your culprits, okay? Not to say that you couldn't have it stain some other kind of color, but that's just tends to be the situation. What I will say though is that the Edison pens, they're made out of cast acrylic, which in the actual chemical name or whatever is acrylic acetate. Okay, so it's a pretty well ink resistant plastic, basically. It's a resin is a nice word for plastic, but that's basically what it is. So it's very resistant to staining. On the inside of the pen, it is not polished up and finished up like it is on the outside of the pen. So the fact that it's kind of rougher on the inside could make some ink kind of hang out a little bit longer, but I don't think it's going to be as prone to staining as you probably might suspect that it would be. So it's the kind of thing, you know, if you were using a different material such as celluloid, like a true celluloid made from like wood or whatever, those have much more of a tendency to stain, especially if you're using bulletproof or like any type of iron gall or any type of natural permanent ink. That you want to keep out of your celluloid pens. If you have a pen like the Omaso Jiva Alba that's like a celluloid blend, those tend to do much, much better. I'm not going to say it's not going to ever stain, but it's going to resist staining a lot more because it's a blend of natural and unnatural, you know, materials. But if you have true celluloid that's actually coming from cell fibers, that is going to have much more of a tendency to stain from inks like the Noodler, especially the Noodlers like permanent inks, because they are cellulose reactive. That's part of why it works so well on the paper, but it's going to be really bad in celluloid pens. But that is not the situation with Edison pens. So you really shouldn't be too concerned about it. I would maybe try, I'm thinking if you can like try testing it at all or whatever. I mean, you could always, you know, test it a little bit inside your grip section would be a pretty safe one. Like you can actually unscrew the grip out of that pen. I wish I had it was in my office, I could show you, but you can unscrew the grip of that, unscrew the nib units out of the grip of that pen, and then you could take like a Q-tip with whatever ink you're using and just like smear it on the inside. You know, leave it for a few days and kind of see what it does, and then wipe it off. If it does stain at all, it shouldn't be an issue because the black nib housing in there is going to give it a dark color anyway, so I'm thinking it might be kind of a safe way to test it without really causing too much trouble. But in general, I think you're going to be okay, so I wouldn't worry too much, okay? I haven't really heard, and I've actually never heard of anyone else having any Edison staining issues from an eyedropper conversion, so that's another thing to just kind of maybe ease your concerns. All right, next question I have. Mirjam L on Facebook says, I have bought a couple of Noodler's Flex pens in the past. I like how they write, but I can't get the hang of writing with Flex. Is there a special technique to it? Normal writing works fine. Yeah, there's definitely a special technique to it. There are some people that I've had that have bought Flex pens and they buy several of them and, you know, either return them or get frustrated with them or throw them in the trash or whatever the case may be. I've had people that have, you know, cursed pens up and down, and then I get them back and they write perfectly fine. You know, some people it's just a thing. It just takes practice. You know, you just can't get the hang of it. It's like anything else. The Flex pens are more of a writing, what I would consider instrument than even a normal fountain pen is. You know, it's like if I were to pick up a violin right now, it wouldn't matter what violin I picked up, it would sound terrible because I'm not good at playing the violin. You know, if I wanted to get good at playing the violin, I would have to practice a lot. and I would have to learn some techniques and stuff like that, which I guess is what you're asking me right now, is what is the technique? Literally, that's what you asked me, is there a special technique? The main technique, so I'm not like a flex master or anything like that. Most of it I've learned myself just from messing around with it and maybe just kind of watching some other videos of people doing it. I can't give you specific ones because it's just been random ones I've come across over the years. But basically the concept is with flex pens is you want to, and I'm assuming you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, that's going to be really tough. That's a whole new element of confusion and frustration to writing with a flex pen that I really can't even get into now because I'm not left-handed, and it's all I know is it's way harder because when you're left-handed and you're trying to flex, you're basically trying to flex in a push motion, and it's just not going to go well. You got to be pretty much right-handed, or if you're left-handed, you have to like seriously turn your paper so that you are almost using it in a pull motion. So it takes a lot of adjustment there, as if it wasn't hard enough already, right? But if you're right-handed, you want to have your pen at a normal writing angle, so around 45 degrees. You want to have your pen about 45 degrees from whatever it is that you're writing, from your writing line. And you want to flex it out basically only when you're going in a pull motion. So when you're going from top left to bottom right. And if you're trying to get any other type of flexing characteristic, you're going to have to actually kind of move your hand as you go. You can't keep your hand and arm completely still and then just flex it in any direction you want. That is not going to work, especially if you're going on the cross stroke, because if you're doing that and you're flexing it out, you're essentially taking this already relatively fine point pen, you're splitting it into two when you flex it out with writing pressure, and then you're dragging it with intense pressure from one side to another. Just think about that. It's not going well. So you have to do it in a pull motion. That's really how they're designed to work. So making sure that you're doing that, and then you lighten up on the writing pressure as soon as you're getting ready to change direction. And just going super, super slow is the key, and just try writing some certain letters over and over again. Now, maybe there's an opportunity to do like a flex pen writing technique video or something like that. My wheels are turning and I'm not maybe the best one to do it, but maybe I could look into it. I don't know, but I'll have that on my mind. So that's kind of like most of what I know about how to write with flex pens, and hopefully that'll help you out something. All right, next question I have is from Chase Harris on YouTube. Chase asked me, I recently purchased a Platinum Preppy highlighter and converted it to an eyedropper with Noodler's Firefly ink. Good ink. The problem I'm having is the pen writes, or rather highlights, extremely wet. Is there a way to adjust the flow on a Preppy highlighter? I thought about using a cartridge to see if that slows things down a bit, but I'm not optimistic. Are there drier alternatives for a refillable highlighter? I also have an M205 Duo, but the line width is too small for my liking. You're talking about the pen, I'm assuming, not the ink. I should also probably mention that most of the highlighting I'm doing is in code books with thinner paper. It's not quite Bible paper, but it's very close. And I'm actually really glad that you kind of tacked that onto the end there, Chase, because that right there tells me pretty much everything I need to know. It's your paper. That's probably going to be your issue. Now you're probably thinking like, well, I've used this paper with other highlighters and stuff like that. Well, other highlighters do not necessarily have the same ink in them. They're going to have a little bit different formulation. So this Noodler's highlighter ink is going to be wetter than normal like Sharpie highlighter type stuff. There's no like solvent component or anything into it like that, because that wouldn't work very well in an ongoing use pen, right? The disposable highlighters, they don't really have to be quite as careful what chemicals they're using in there, just because it's disposable, so it only has to last through one use of the pen, then you're going to toss it out and go use it, get another one. For a refillable highlighter, the ink has to be a little friendlier because it's something you're going to have to use over and over and over and over and over and over again. Not to say that you won't need to replace those highlighter tips, you definitely will, but not with the same regularity, not every time you refill the pen like you would theoretically if you're using just like a highlighter marker. I think the paper is a lot of your issue. So you're gonna need to try and find some other kind of solution. Whether that means switching inks, that's probably what it might mean. I don't know. I took some notes on this earlier, but as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I don't know of any trick that you can do, anything that you can add to the ink or whatever that would help it perform better on thin paper like that. That is getting outside of my brain you know, whatever. Yeah, brain. We'll just say brain. I can't think of another word to go with brain. But it's getting outside of my area of knowledge that I can pull directly out of my brain. So the Noodler's Dragon Cat inks are drier. So is Noodler's Year the Golden Pig. Those are the ones that are coming off the top of my head that are drier. Noodler's has some other highlighter inks like Georgia Peach and Atlantic Salmon and stuff like that, but they are not going to be any drier than Firefly. So I think the Dragon Cats and the Year of the Golden Pig would be more your ticket. There's some other highlighter inks like Private Reserve Chartreuse. There's the M205 Duo, like you mentioned here earlier. That is going to be very similar to Firefly. So I don't anticipate that those would give you much of a different result. Maybe I could be wrong, but I doubt it. And then as far as the pen goes, you know, kind of the only other alternative that I would have is that, you know, aside from a highlighter type marker, you could use more of a metal tip. Something like a Pilot Parallel is always a good highlighter option that I like to recommend to people. The M205 Duo that you have there is actually a double broad. That's really not, it's really not a highlighter nib. I was always kind of interested when Pelikan decided to come out with that nib as an option for a highlighter pen as opposed to an italic nib. I felt like that would have made more sense, like a, you know, 1.9 italic or something would have to me would have been a better choice for a true highlighter pen. But anyway, so I think that could be an option for you, the Pilot Parallel, like either 1.5 or 2.3, depending on how big your lines are. But that, I'm not sure if that would necessarily be the ticket for you here, but it's a $10 investment, so maybe it's something you want to try if you're interested in that pen anyway. All right, then the last question I have is from Jacob W. Says, this may be a dumb question, but I recently purchased my first piston-filled pen. Congratulations. I am a bit disappointed by how dry it writes. I decided to open the piston a half turn to fill the feed with ink, and the pen started to write much more wet. I was wondering if I should always open the piston when I write, or if the nib needs to be altered. Okay. So I don't know what pen you're talking about here, so I can't really be super specific. What you're doing there, you're not actually opening the piston. Basically what you're doing, the piston is just moving up and down. There's no opening and closing happening. The ink chamber that you have inside your pen, it's just an empty container, basically, with a hole at the bottom of it that goes to the feed and it brings ink to the nib, and that's how it writes. In a nutshell. So you aren't really opening and closing anything. It's not like, for example, if you have a vacuum filling pen, like the TWSBI VAC 700 or the Pilot Custom 823, those pens actually have an O-ring in it so that when you have the filler knob screwed all the way down, it literally is closing up the container of ink in there. And that's intentional. That's so that with a large volume of ink like that, when you fly or travel with a lot of changing of altitudes, your container of ink is locked up and it's not going to leak. That's why they do it that way. So those, when you write with them, you need to unscrew the filler knob and kind of pull on it a little bit to open up that chamber. That's not the situation with a piston filling pen. Piston filling pen just has a piston seal and it just moves up and down when you screw and unscrew it. So it's always open. What you're doing when you're unscrewing your piston knob is you're moving it down and you're basically pushing ink down through the feed, through the nib, so you're kind of just getting it wetter again, which is exactly what you're describing. So that's what's actually happening. And if you're asking me if that's something that you should do every time, well, if it's writing drier than you like, you need to do that every time if you want it to write like it writes when it's wetter. But no, it should not normally function like that. A piston filling pen should operate just under its own capillary action. It shouldn't need to be forced down like that. So there's either a couple of things going on. It could be your pen, that is certainly an option, or certainly a possibility. It could be that the ink that you're using is not as wet or as saturated as you feel that it should be, and it's just a matter of you need a different ink. Case in point, very first ink that I ever bought was Diamine China Blue. And when I used it for the first time, I actually bought it at a pen show. I had it swabbed up for me in front of my face. And I saw it and I was like, man, that's a nice dark ink. Well, I was looking at a fresh swab. The ink hadn't dried all the way yet, and it was done with a wet Q-tip swab. So when I actually inked it up in my pen and I went to use it, it dried and it was, well, essentially what you think a China blue should look like. it was kind of a royal blue, very kind of a light color. And I was like, oh, this isn't really as dark as I want. And I tried to like, you know, shake it and do all kinds of stuff to write with it. And it just was not writing any wetter than it should. And I was like, oh, dang it. You know, and so that literally the first ink I ever used in a fountain pen for me was a disappointing experience because I was basically using the wrong ink because I was expecting it to be darker than it should have been. That was actually a very formative experience for me because, you know, I learned a lot of things about, you know, doing ink swabs and, you know, ink samples and stuff like that that have kind of influenced the Goulet Pen Company from that whole experience. But anyway, so what had actually happened, funny enough, is like very meant to be this way, but I mean, think about this. This was in 2009, mid-2009. I didn't know anything about fountain pens, literally. And I talk about this in, you know, various points in my Goulet story, how I didn't know anything about fountain pens. I went to the DC Fountain Pen Show in 2009, of August of 2009, and I went to this show and it like opened my eyes. I was like, I literally went to the show to buy my first bottle of ink and to buy a Rhodia pad so that I could write with these things, you know, so I could use a fountain pen. That was why I went to that show. And it just like, as soon as I went to that show, it was like, I need to learn fountain pens. And I got on the Fountain Pen Network and started searching around, and that's what got the ball rolling. Anyway, so from that experience, what happened is I got the whole swab thing. I got my big diamine bottle of 80 ml bottle of China Blue, which I still have to this day, that I've used almost none of just because it's not really my color. But it's in like the old gold diamond box, you know what I mean? For those of you who've been around for a while, you remember that one. But anyway, so the retailer that was selling that at the time was giving away a 30 ml bottle of diamine to accompany that one. And they had a kind of a limited selection, but in addition to the bottle of China Blue that I got a 30 ml bottle of diamine Midnight. And I actually still have that bottle. If you look, it's in my What's in My Bag that I referenced earlier in this video. It's actually that little 30 ml bottle that I have there. That's the bottle of Diamine Midnight that I got 5.5 years ago. So if you're wondering if ink can last that long, sure as heck can, because I've got mine, I still use it. I don't use Diamine Midnight very often, but that's what was in there. Anyway, I use that when I travel sometimes in a pinch. If I'm like, oh shoot, I'm going out of town, I need a little bottle of ink, I don't have any samples on hand, boop, little Diamine Midnight. Anyway, so get a little more comfortable here. So where was I going with that whole story? My goodness. So yes, that to me was a lesson of like, okay, I had this China Blue and the Diamine Midnight is a much darker blue. So literally what happened was I used the China and I was trying to do everything I could to make it darker, and it was just not happening. It looked great when it was wet, and as soon as it got dry, it looked lighter. And I was like, oh, I guess that happens. Because I came from the world of rollerballs where you put it down and it stays and that's it. That's all there is to it, you know. And then later on, I learned to appreciate lesser saturated inks because they can do shading and do some other cool stuff. And now I like China Blue as a color, but still. But the situation that I was in then, I was very disappointed. Initial ink purchase, I was all excited, little to no experience with fountain pens. So I cleaned it out of my pen, and then I inked up the Diamine Midnight. And as soon as I used it, I was like, oh, this is what I wanted. Okay. So the ink choice really makes a huge difference. And that to me was just like, man, this is so cool. I can choose, and I had like an emotional feeling of, oh, this ink let me down. And the next one was like, oh, this is so much more what I wanted. Midnight wasn't the perfect blue for what I wanted, but it was much darker and more saturated, and it was much more on the ticket of what would ultimately end up being kind of what I wanted at that time. So it was very like, aha, light bulb went off. I was like, oh man, a little subtle difference in color makes a huge difference in the feeling you get when you're writing with your fountain pen. And that has stuck with me, even to this day, absolutely. That's why we do the swab shop, that's why we do ink samples, that's why we do Monday Matchup and Flex Nib Friday, and we try and show all these inks as much as we possibly can. That's why we do handwritten notes. Part of that is there's this thing when you see an ink and you're just like, yeah, that's what I want. That matters, man. That's part of the experience. For me, it's like fountain pens. The pens are great. I love the pens, love taking them apart, playing with them, you know, all that kind of stuff. Paper's cool, like paper, but ink. The ink. It's all about the ink for me. So anyway, that was a very long tangent, kind of wrapping up. It's a last question too, and I got a good little bit of battery left, so I'm just kind of rambling on. Basically, it could very well be your ink choice. So try switching up some inks that you have. Maybe you're just not using an ink that's dark enough for what you want. Unless it's to the point where like the pen literally is not writing because it's drying up. Maybe that's the case. So it could be the ink. You might need a wetter ink. You might need an ink that is just darker and more saturated, more what you're looking for. It could be the nib choice that you have. A lot of times, people that don't know much about fountain pens will have an idea of how it should write, and if it's not writing wet enough or it's writing too wet, they tend to think that it's something wrong with the pen when really it could just be the nib choice. So, selection. So maybe consider that. If you're using an extra fine or a fine and it happens to be not as dark a line or not as wet or broad of a line as you want, it's not anything wrong with the pen necessarily, but it's just that it's not what you were looking for. So I would consider that as well. Really the thing to distinguish is the pen functioning properly. You know, is it actually writing? Is it skipping? Is it breaking? Is it, you know, the line, I mean, is a line breaking when you're trying to write? Is it not actually writing at all? That might be an indication that something is up with the pen. The first thing I would do is a thorough cleaning. You know, Fountain Pen 101 video, pen cleaning and maintenance. Go check that out. Learn how to clean that pen thoroughly. Sometimes when you have a new pen and you ink it up for the very first time, there might be some machining oils or some, you know, debris left over from manufacturing that are in the feed and just kind of breaking up the flow a little bit. Doing an initial cleaning is never a bad idea for any new pen. I don't always do it myself, depending on how excited I am to try my new pen, but you know, it's usually pretty inevitable that I will. It's never a bad idea, and I always recommend it. If you try a new pen and you have any kind of a flow issue whatsoever, clean the pen. Just immediately clean the pen, ink it back up with the same ink and try it again, because 9 times out of 10, that alone will fix it. If that's not it, another thing you could try, try switching up the ink, just using a different ink, any ink, whatever you have on hand. Use a different ink and see if that gives you any different results. Sometimes some inks are a little drier in some pens than others. Can't always explain why that is. There's a chemical explanation for it, but ink is a bit mysterious in its chemical makeup because the manufacturers don't really publish anything about what it's like or what it's made of, but that could be another option. You could dilute the ink if it's like, the kind of thing where you've been using that ink in other pens and you know that ink is right and it's just not working so well in that pen. It's more of a compatibility issue. You could try diluting a small bit of that ink, maybe like dilute it 10% or so, like 10% distilled water is the best, but if you've got relatively clean tap water, you can do that and no one's gonna die. You can put a little bit into a small vial or something and just mix up just a small batch just to test it. Don't go dumping water into your whole bottle and ruining the whole thing. But just try testing that out. Sometimes having a little water in there can change the flow characteristics a little bit and can make it flow a little easier in your pen and break some things up. If you try all these things and nothing is helping, if it's a relatively new pen, I would reach out to the retailer where you bought it and see if you can exchange it or return it or whatever. If it was me, we do that kind of thing all the time. So it's no big deal, I totally understand. If it's kind of beyond that point, or it's a pen that you didn't get from a place where you can return it or whatever the situation might be, if it's a pen that's got a replaceable nib unit, you could try getting another one of those. You could try doing some small tuning and adjustments, maybe start going down that road. But I think between all these things that I've discussed here, you should have some pretty good options. Okay? So that kind of takes it home for this week's Q&A. I do have actually a special thing to announce for next week's Q&A. So I've been collecting some kind of good feedback, some good questions from previous Q&As. Number 64 was a good one when I got a lot of good feedback about how can we improve the Q&A and what do you like to do with it and stuff like that. Basically, I have been working on my media team at Goulet Pens. So my media team now consists of Jenny, who's our videographer, Sarah is our photographer, Mike, who's our manager, and then we just moved over, Margaret and Madigan from our customer care, who a lot of you may have interacted with them on the phone or email, live chat, or getting handwritten notes from them when you place orders. They are now moved over to our media team. They're going to be our community coordinators. So they're going to be interacting with you on Twitter and Facebook and some of these other places. So if you really like them, you're going to be really happy that you're going to get to see them in some other ways. So really just, we got a good thing going on. I can't manage everything. I can't be everywhere at once. And I got a lot of really, really talented, really creative people who have joined my team, and I'm super happy about that. So I actually want to introduce all of them to you. So next week's Q&A theme is going to be Meet the Goulet Media Team. So we're going to get to meet them, and so I want the question of the week for this week is to be, ask me some questions for my media team to answer, okay? I want you to ask some questions, you know, it could be anything like, what's it like to work with Brian? How many takes does he really have on his videos? You know, what kind of, you know, video equipment do you use? Or what's your background? You know, where'd you go to school? What do you like to do in your free time? What's it really like to work at Goulet? You know, whatever it is, go ahead and ask. And, you know, I would love to have some just really interesting questions. So we'll be able to bring on some other people, which we've been asking for, get some different questions and maybe shoot in some different little places around there. I don't know, it'd be cool. So it'd be a nice little creative thing that we can do. But I'd love to introduce my team, especially Margaret and Madigan. You're going to be seeing them a little bit more on some of the channels as they kind of learn the ropes. They're in training right now. We're teaching them kind of the Goulet way of doing everything. So it should be a lot of fun. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this Q&A in the different location at the house. So thanks for being flexible with that. I always appreciate it. And if you are happening to have me third wheel with you on your date night, it's been a pleasure. So why not? So super awkward, but I am in my pajama pants. So I guess I'm a little you know, different zone than I normally would be at work. But I hope you have a wonderful, I should just shut up and stop talking. I hope you have a wonderful, great rest of the weekend, great week, and I'll see you next week with my media team. Right on.